Iko Nini. So kuna vile burial ya Raila inaendelea kumake headlines, sama the death of Raila, and it was very interesting because end up nikiona a certain like little conflict between Professor Kibwana na Miguna. And I was like, what is this all about? So ilitoka na video fulani ile ilifanywa na Africa Uncensored. So Africa Uncensored walikuwa na talk about Raila's burial and the fact that he didn't follow the Luo norms. So wacha tusikie hiyo part.
We didn't do what we ought to have done as a community. He was given the bare minimum for a person of his stature. But if it was left for the customary kind of a burial, then it should have been very elaborate. But Raila Odinga, being what is referred to as the Agwambo, or the mysterious one, had his own plans and his own ways. He made life very difficult for some of us. Because truthfully, by today, Raila Odinga shouldn't have been buried if we needed to be very elaborate about the customary procedures. But the little he was given, we are happy about it. But we could have given him more.
So umsa alikuwa napongajia the fact that Raila alikuwa buried super fast, and ilikuwa a surprise to everyone because I remember like the first time nilisikia Raila amededi, this was last week on Wednesday. I remember calling Robo na nikiambia Robo that na kuna vile umse your body kiletwa daytime italeta commotion, so according to me the body should be brought in at night. And so kibongeo design namwambia like hii body hata kiletwa huko like next week on some random day at night and evil. Then what did we hear? We hear that he'd written that he was supposed to be buried within 72 hours, and the only reason that it ended up being more than 72 hours was the fact that he passed away outside the country. So everything was done super fast, but still hii part bado okay. So wacha tumalize the whole clip ndio tubaki tumecheki kwa nini Miguna na Kivudha leta na juu
Even him more.
But I think there's a deeper issue here or question is what counts as traditional or cultural. And there's this idea people have that traditional is something that is fixed. People, Kitambo used to do this and they always did this, which is not true. Cultures change, they move around, people adapt different circumstances. And the fact is lots of what we consider today as cultural would not be recognizable to people who were living 100 years ago.
And that one makes a lot of sense. A lot of stuff that we consider as cultural, because we have our so-called tribal ethnic customs and traditions, and also we have other identities. You'll find someone say that this religion first, then my tribe second. You see, that's culture, and that culture has evolved over time, because if you go back to your great grandfather, they'd be like, what najua what nacheki. So that evolves. So nakubaliana na hiyo point.
We've gone through colonialism, which has changed a lot of our ideas of even what our communities are. So I wouldn't be too stuck up on whether there was a faithful rendition of Luo culture. Cultures will evolve, they'll always change. And what we have now is not what we had then. So we have to be careful about sort of valorizing a cultural way of doing these burials. I think being stuck with certain sort of precepts of what used to be is not necessarily very helpful.
So yes, so this was a very, I'd say, simple video. So when this video ili end up kwa Kivudha Kibwana, the way he ended up interpreting it was akasema, indeed Raila Odinga tried to reverse some inhibiting cultures. If the Luo / other Kenyan nations really loved him, they would adopt his cultural wisdom. Then akaendelea, he said male circumcision was good, especially to decrease HIV infections, and now 72 hours are enough to bury a loved one. So and I think this is what ended up pissing off Miguna, because this is one of the things lemusamaga, like as Luo dudes kuna kuwaga na hiyo thing where deki were gonna bring you up even in conversations that it's not supposed to be brought up in. So I think maybe, I don't know if it's the choice of words, you're inhibiting cultures. I don't know if that's what got to Miguna, but somehow Miguna felt like he needs to react to this. And I'd say, and alafu pia of course ikikam to history ya HIV infections inakuwaga very divisive pia, especially the more that you learn about the world. When you end up learning that in the world 70% of males are uncircumcised, and then you understand that specifically the Japanese, the Chinese, and Europeans wako uncircumcised, and they have the lowest rates of HIV. So the rates of HIV in Japan, where Japan is a homogeneous society, so it means that 99% of them are uncircumcised. Then we go to China, also very homogeneous. To say, let's work with pia the same, like maybe 95% tukitoa the Uyghur Muslims wale wako huko. Alafu tuende Europe, najua the Germany and the England and the what, and you look at that, and then you look at the HIV infections, you're like, this does not correlate. And then you'll go as far as looking at maybe South Africa, for example, where the black population was really infected, and the white population, Africans, who are descendants of the Dutch, and the Dutch don't get circumcised, were not as infected. So and don't forget, Africa has like one of the highest circumcision rates. So this thing, I know there's a case for it, but there's also a case for there is more to this than that. So I understand. What's the case? The case for it in Akwagani, the infection comes through cuts. And of course, if someone is uncut, they are easily cut, if that makes sense. And so there's that. But sasa Miguna, I guess because of his story, alienda pame andika, Luos do not circumcise, period. Luo culture, like all others, is dynamic. However, its dynamic isn't determined by individual sentiments, regardless of the perceived status of the one making the sentiments. Raila Odinga himself and members of his family are not circumcised. Linking HIV/AIDS with Luo culture is ethnocentric and retrogressive. Focus on your culture, Professor Kibwana. Hani Professor Kibwana. So even they end up reply on that. And do I personally think that circumcision helps? Yes. But do I think that's the reason why it spread like wildfire in Africa? I will say no. Because do I also think that the Japanese and the Chinese and the Europeans use more condoms than Africans? No. Ngono inakuwaga such an animal instinct. There's no one who takes more precaution than the next person. I always use the example that tukiangalia specifically hii story, where first of all ukimwi ilikuwa detected majuu, ilikuwa inajulikana kama ugonjwa ya mashoga. How did it end up spreading in the continent where hatukuwagi tumekubali hizo story faster than any other part? There is a lot that can be said about this. Kuna clip flani ningebaki nimeshare hapa, but walamu watakagi to question how that thing spread hapa. Na tuseme that maybe ili spread mostly juu si udungwa, because atufanyagi any scientific research. So anyone shows up and tells us they are treating us, tunakubali. And of course tutangalia hata US yenye the Tuskegee experiments, but that's something una need to check out for yourself. But that was not any. Then of course Miguna nakabakia kasema most cultures in Africa and the rest of the world, including in Europe, don't circumcise. Africa, I think it's the majority. Africa and Middle East, I think it should be the majority. Europe, Asia should be the minority. So I'd say that. Africa, it's only in Kenya where professors idly spend inordinate amounts of time ruminating over pubic hair and phallus instead of addressing intractable societal issues. The preoccupation with Luo culture by mostly male adults belonging to other cultures is a symptom of self-esteem and myopia on their part. Let's focus on the effects tens of millions of Kenyans instead of wasting time on ethnocentric nonsense. I don't think, pia naeza tetea Kibwana and say, I don't think he meant it in a bad way. Maybe alikuwa na mean to your design ya Raila ya just embrace other cultures. And me, that's how I always look at it. I always say that the British East African Company, BEAC, is the one that formed Kenya. And when the BEAC formed Kenya, they told us that nyinyi ni Kenyans. Anyone else who tells you some bullshit that Kenya used to exist before the British is full of shit. There was no Kenya. The British created Kenya. So when the British East African Company really bring up all these cultures together, it found people with very different cultures. And somehow in Kenya to end up that majority of the tribes circumcise. So that means I think the few that don't circumcise ni Luos and Turkanas. So for them to be part of the country, they can decide, you know what, we are going to do this culture because it's a Kenyan culture. And then they end up doing it. Is it a must that they do it? No. But would it be good just for Kenyan shit? Yeah, you can do it. Is it the reason why HIV infections are high? We can argue about it and say in Luo Nyanza, but then the numbers from Japan, as I keep saying, and China and Germany and England tell a very different story. So, and this is information that's also very interesting for a lot of people because ausemaga kutembea kuingi kuona mengi. So if you live in Kenya na haujaijua other cultures, you'll think that this is a practice that's practiced by the majority of males on earth. Then you find out it's actually practiced by the minority. So your village and the world are very different. And so hapa ndio nachekaga like say kama the Minister for Trade at some point alikuwa Moses Kuria. So the question used to be, if the foreskin misleads the mind, are you supposed to deal with the Chinese and the Japanese and the Germans and the English even? And if you let a controversy when I say the damage that we did to the British during the fight for freedom was so small that we didn't even notice they don't get circumcised. Have you ever noticed? Like all the insults utasikia inakwaga jaka, hautaisikia an insult about the British. So how many British did we kill? I don't want to know the real numbers because majuzi nilikuwa get into an argument with someone on the damage. Someone had said that Kenya should arrest the king wa England. And I was like, the English army would obliterate us. Inaweza tumaliza in such a short time. Like, don't even lie to yourself. I think ile kitu ile happen masaiza Middle East inafaa kuonyesha wase weapons ni very different from hiyo kitu wasojidanganya ni roho. Ukiwa na roho unaweza fight msee. Akikuja na KR-15 wana come up na yako fake. No. Hiyo ni nonsense. It's childish nonsense. If we arrested the king of England, that would be declaring war on England, and England can destroy us in seconds. Usidanganyike na story umeenda uko na museum. A lot of those stories ni stories za jaba, but I won't get into that right now. So wacha tutoke hapo tuende kwa stories zingine za jaba. Another thing that has happened is right now this debate around the cybercrime act, and everyone is defending it. And I think that the government saizi kile miamua ni just to unleash a lot of information about this cyber law and try and justify why they have it. Why? Because if you are to ask me, and this is a conversation I had with Casmuel, and this is another disagreement I'd have with YY, and it's everyone thinks that this cyber law is about bullying. It's not about bullying. And right now they notice that if they use bullying as the main excuse, hawata get away nayo. So what have they done? They've come up with this whole theory that this thing is about ngono za watoi. So apparently hapa Kenya kuna ngono za watoi online so much that I'm there like, how is that? Mimi mtu kona mtoi. So of course this is something that would worry me, and this is something that worries me. But the way that the government talks about it, you'd think there's a pandemic about it. But wacha tusikie vile rais alikuwa anatetea hii story.
Tunataka tulinde taifa letu la Kenya. You know? Saa zingine tunazembea Saa ile mambo imeharibika, tunatafuta mtu wa kulaumu. Tumesema ya kwamba maneno ya religious extremism, ile ambayo inatuletea hasara kama ile tulipata kule Shakahola, lazima tuzuie. Tumesema vile vile mambo ya vijana wetu wanaangaishwa, they are being terrorized kule kwa social media, na mambo machafu, mambo ya usherati, mambo ya pornography. Hiyo pia lazima tuzuie kama serikali.
So hii history ya pornography na shindwa, like which sort of nini tunabonga juu yake? Tunabonga juu ya watoi ama tunabonga juu ya adults? Tunaongea juu ya kina Alicia Kanini ama who are we talking about? Because kuna historia nasema watu wanakuwa terrorized, and I'm wondering which kids are these who are being terrorized, and why are these kids on these adult platforms? What are these kids doing on adult platforms? So this is what I'm trying to understand, and the more that someone tries to explain to me this cyber crimes act, the more they look confused, because they're just coming up with stuff. They're just making up stuff as they go. This is the main problem. This is the main problem. Wacha tusikie the president's version, alafu at some point tutasikiza Kimani Ichung'wah.
Kama serikali, wale wanaendesha hiyo biashara ya kuumiza vijana wetu, mpaka unakuta vijana wengi wanaenda commit suicide, wanajinyonga kwa sababu ya terrorism ile iko huko ndani ya mitandao. Lazima tu.
So ndio kitu nizataka, something like this you have to back it up with numbers. You have to tell us that in the past blah blah blah, watu kama hawa wamejidedisha na wamedai juu ya cyberbullying. Because I feel like the internet penetration in Kenya, it's good but it's not perfect. It's so low that we need to be thinking of ways ya kufanya watu access internet more. But kama tunasema tayari so far there is a pandemic ya wasee kujidedisha, then we need to slow down. We need to think about, hey, maybe this internet thing is not something that we are ready for. So I'd want to know that if there is a platform that people get bullied on kabisa, ni Twitter. And I don't remember the last time nilisikia kuna mseme kwa bullied on Twitter alafu akadu anything, akaji self harm. But wacha tuendelee.
Wazuie hawa watu. Vile vile wale wanatumia mitandao kuendesha ugaidi. We must also stand up to them and protect the nation. We must protect Kenya. You know, na tuseme ukweli. Unajua kuna watu wanatafuta kuchafua Kenya kwa mbinu zote. Rais alisign. Hii sheria ilikuweko. Amendment ilianza 2024. Amendment ilifanywa na bunge. Mimi niliamuka on Wednesday. Mimi nikiwa na kwa sababu hiyo ndio ilikuwa kazi yangu ya siku hiyo. Na ni kazi ya kikatiba.
So hapa ni pale the president anajitetea, because a lot of people say that he signed the bill on the same day that Raila passed away. Kuna watu walikuwa nasema that he took advantage of the morning to pass that bill. Yes, as I keep saying, he said some wild stuff hapa, and I'd want him to back it with numbers. I don't want to hear the numbers of blah 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 wamejiumiza juu ya mtandao. So the ugaidi, of course, we fully support that, as in ugaidi haifai kuwa, and if there is anyone promoting ugaidi anafaa kuchuguliwa. Unajua wale wase tumechikiwa kisupport ugaidi ama wakisema vitu za kigaidi ni wase wanasikizana na president. Kuna msee mmoja alishaisemaga angededisha wase 5,000, hiyo ni ugaidi, and that person was saying that why for the president. Msee pia shasemekana shatumia video zake zishatumika for propaganda. So which ugaidi is a normal Kenyan, like normal average Kenyan dealing with kikam to ugaidi? But of course, yes, if it's about banning ugaidi, hapo pia tuko na shida nayo. Kikam kuban ngono za watoi, we have no problem with that. The only thing we are like, hii kitu vile mlibonga, it's a very small part inabonga juu ya ngono za watoi, the huge part inabonga juu ya kuhurt feelings za watu na watu kujiumiza. Acha tuendelee.
Na ni kazi ya kikatiba ya kutia mkono sheria kwa sababu ilikuwa imepita viwango vyote. Nikaletewa na speaker. Bahati mbaya tukapoteza waziri wetu mkuu wa zamani. Lakini tayari nilikuwa ofisini kwa hiyo kazi. Hata nilikuwa nimevaa shati, nilikuwa naenda Ukambani kwa mambo ya barabara. So I was on duty just like any other citizen. Hakuna kitu ya kuficha, hakuna kitu ya giza, hakuna kitu inafanywa usiku. We are doing the right thing for Kenya. We want to protect this nation from situations that undermine the well-being of the young people of our nation, the well-being of the people of Kenya, the security of the country, na yale mambo mengine ambayo yatatusaidia.
So the part that is Jakarta is that I've never and this is all I do. All I do is I spend a lot of time on the internet, and I spend a lot of time looking for topics to talk about. And I can comfortably tell you, in the last 4.5 years that I've been doing this podcast, I've never had situations za watu kujiumiza juu ya cyberbullying. I'm yet to hear that hapa Kenya. If it's happened, maybe it's one case in the population of 55 million. So it's a very small problem. For it to be used as the core reason why wanna do his story is for them to be dishonest. Iko Nini, nimeinterrupt show kukuremind you LemFi. Kama uko US ama Canada na unataka kutuma do Kenya, register kwa LemFi ukitumia promo code Iko Nini. Hii itakuguarantee $20 cashback on your first $100 transaction. Alafu pia time una register, make sure umetick the 2 checkboxes za notifications ndio ukireceive info about amazing offers through newsletters. Na pia usijali, LemFi hawatumagi hizi letters za, yani unajua ma messages za kipumbavu. Pia usisahau, every time una transact $50 and above una earn points. Na the more una transact, the more points you earn, and you can redeem them as cash ile time unatuma pesa. Alafu pia kitu nanibamba kabisa ni saizi ukitumia LemFi mzabaki umelipa pay bills na till numbers directly. That means mzabaki umehandle bills za maparo wako ukiwa hizo maside za States ama maside za Canada. Alafu pia wewe mwenyewe as a LemFi user baki umetafuta ile button imeandikwa get USD $20, ubaki umeinvite mabeste zako, na ukiinvite mabeste zako on their first $100 transaction unapata pesa ngapi? $20 cashback. So unangoja nini? Baki umechangamka, ingia LemFi. LemFi, international payments for everyone. Iko Nini. But now, as I said, they have to come up with these stories. So the president comes up with a story of cyberbullying. But then now, Kimani Ichung'wah decides to use a whole different story. He come to his story, and Kimani Ichung'wah nilifind ikiwa interesting because alianza mpaka kubonga juu ya a certain person who got married, and I think this person is married to more than one woman, and since wako married to more than one woman, and apparently they've done a study, and the study is kuna very high divorce rates hapa Kenya, and these high divorce rates are courtesy of what? Courtesy of wase kuwatch Nopo. And I always find these stories to be super interesting. I feel like everyone just pulls something and they just run with it because they know that no one is going to ask for the numbers to back that up. So wacha tusikize Kimani Ichung'wah na version yake.
Bishop, when I spoke to Honorable Daud Mohammed, he told me that in his research as he came up with that bill, he's a Muslim. Waislamu kama baba yetu hapa, na hakuwa Muislamu lakini wazee rika yake walikuwa wanaoa mabibi wengi. Waislamu huoa mabibi wengi. They are allowed up to 4. But he told me the rates of divorce are very high. Why? Access to pornographic content.
How does this work? The rates of divorce are high because of access to pornographic content. How? Kuna vitu muskiaga jona shindwa na watu how is serious? Okay, tuendelee.
Mzee ako na simu ama laptop yake, anaangalia website za pornography. Mtoto pia anapata ile simu anaangalia.
So what sort of parent is this ule anashare na mtoi wake phone kama ifungwa hizo pages? Like what sort of parent is this? And pia what sort of kid is this that goes on websites? Like najuaga watoi, mtoi wangu ashatumiaga phone yangu and inakuwaga strictly up. Atatry either kutumia WhatsApp kupigia madhake, ama kama ameboeka anaweza try kutumia YouTube, which is super rare. Try kutumia YouTube, but kupata mtoi wangu ati iko www. Kids are not doing that. They used to apps. So do these parents have apps that zina deal na nopo? Like, okay, but wacha tuendele na hizi madivorce.
There is nowhere, Your Excellency, in the world other than in Kenya where you can access a pornographic site with no sanction.
Hii pia ni kitu na try to understand. What do you mean by access a pornographic site with no sanction? We are a secular state. So as a secular state, as an adult, yes, who is over 18 years old, I should be allowed to watch whatever I want to watch as an adult. So what sort of sanctions are you talking about, number one? Number two, how are you going to do it? Because if you block the sites, there's something called VPNs. We are still going to end up in those sites. So there's nothing you can do about it. The worst thing about technology is there's always another way. So what are we talking about? Are we saying that even adults should not be able to visit these adult sites? Ama what are we trying to say? And Kenya is the only country. I'm like, no. Other countries, these Western European countries are actually scary. I want nothing. Like these only zile countries that people want to take their kids there and whatever, but ukisikia laws, hizo countries are scary. Like I don't want anything kudeal na hizo countries. And so for you to claim hivi, but wacha tumalizie.
That, Bishop, is what we are trying to save our country from. I can only pray that the church and all Kenyans of goodwill will support Parliament and support the government of Kenya to stem this bad behavior. Yeah, access to pornography, allow us to have laws that will protect the children of Kenya.
You see, this is a very simple law. If you came up with a law and said that access to pornography for children is banned, there is no one who would be against that. But we know this is not the law. There's a reason why you keep concentrating on child pornography, because you know the bill is not about that, and you know that everyone supports us stopping that. Like that's a crime if any adult is found doing that. And even that's what makes this even bill interesting, that the guy who proposed this bill actually comes from the northeastern, where just majuzi kulikuwa na whole debate about child marriage. So uni mse nafaa kumpata kwa frontline akifight child marriage more than akifight history ingine. But sasa, one of the things you notice, like after listening to the president and after listening to Kimani Ichung'wah, you end up noticing that these guys were given talking points. And as they were given talking points, wacha saa tusikie, kuzu ndio mse sasa alipropose the bill. And the bill is, yes, this is the guy that proposed this bill. So wacha tumsikie akiulizwa. And you'll notice, he just rushes to your side. Because they know we all are against that. Should not even, like we all know that watoi hawafai kuwa naona kitu yote juu ya ngono. So hiyo tunajua, no one is disputing that. Ile kitu tuna dispute ni hii part inabonga juu ya if you say something that can offend someone else and that person goes to court, because the truth is offensive. Najua when we talk about corruption in this country, corruption is offensive. And even before nicheze vitu za umse, lazima niseme kitu moja. Majuzi vile nilienda say Cape Town, I noticed two things. First of all, weed is legal. So story zenyu za kuvuta bangi uharibu vitu ni story ingine. Cape Town and Nairobi are not on the same planet. Cape Town is like a million miles ahead of Nairobi. And huko weed is legal. As in you walk around and you can smell marijuana on the streets. Another thing, kulikuwa na an adult store. And that adult store is even open during the day. Are there kids in Cape Town? Yes, there are kids in Cape Town. Is it in an African country? Yes, it's in an African country. So what is that showing us? If you gave a Nairobian a chance to live legally in Cape Town and still be able to, like, may either maintain their standards of living, or take it a notch higher but live there legally. Ama live in Nairobi. Which city would they choose? They choose Cape Town, even with the adult stores there, even with the legalized marijuana. So this whole story of moralism inakuwaga bullshit that the politicians know they can play around with, because they know that a lot of people don't know like what's happening in other countries. But wacha tusikize umse propose bill.
Let's begin with, when you proposed this bill, what are the key drivers that you identified in Kenya's digital landscape that made you feel that an update was urgently needed?
You know that the cyberspace is evolving very fast. There are so many things that are changing every day. A few years ago, we didn't have the internet. It came in the 1980s. Now we have AI, we have blockchain, we have all those things. Our laws actually catch up with development. As the cyberspace develops, our laws have to catch up with those developments.
Which, yes, that makes sense. We are catching up. New stuff is coming up. So new ways of fraud is gonna come up. So that's like one of the things back in the days, being a Yahoo boy, where you could defraud people from other countries while you're in Africa. We could get away with it. Nowadays they come and find you in your bedroom and wanakupeleka. So yes, the laws are changing. Fully agree with that.
What made me do this amendment is really because of we didn't have any law that is barring child pornography in Kenya.
That's nonsense. Hakuna kitu nizani convince we didn't have any law barring child pornography in Kenya. We had that. But it's such a good talking point. If you can keep just driving this point that anyone who's against the Cybercrimes Act is just against it because of ngono ya watoi, you can push that nini, but no one is looking at that. Even the clause that everyone is concentrating on is ile clause specifically inabongajia offending people, because that's what we have a problem with, and it's specifically cyber harassment. Yes, hakuna mtu yote nimeona akishare part ya ngono na watoi na criticize. Is cyber harassment ile a person who individually or with other persons willfully communicates either directly or indirectly with another person or anyone known to that person commits an offense if they know or ought to know that their conduct is likely to cause those persons apprehension or fear of violence to them or damage or loss to that person's property, detrimentally affect that person, or is in whole or part of an incident or grossly offensive nature and affects the person. Being affected, you can be affected by an opinion. And so, where does freedom of expression start and where does it end? This is a very ambiguous thing. That we have hii conversation na Kasmel, and of course Kasmel has been attacked online, so maybe he looks at it from that point of maybe if this law was passed, I would not be attacked. Personally, I've been attacked online. I always say, when you attack too, najua hiyo ni yako. And this is something that I've come to notice, and I think ilikuwa ni aje, that a lot of people who attack watu for no reason, inakuwaga they are battling their own demons. It's really hard to find a happy person who just wakes up and starts attacking you. It's hard. Or a busy person. It takes a very idle person to do such things. So like I even gave the example the Raila Junior challenge. So to claim that this is all about ngono ya watoi na sisi tunakataa kuzataki kuprotect watoi, everyone wants to protect the kids, but we know this is not about that. We know that this is going to be about more of this cyber harassment, where you can be like, oh, whatever you said about the president affected the president in a way, and now, whatever you said about that corrupt governor affected that corrupt governor in a way. Why did you say that governor is corrupt? And all this moralism nonsense is something that we push around, and kutembea kiwingi kuona mengi. I won't lie to you, like when I was looking at majuzi nikiangalia Cape Town, alafu vile nasema I walk through the streets, I smell marijuana kwa streets, naona marijuana store kwa streets, naona watu hiyo wakipita tu around your area. Ilinionyesha immoralism yetu waga ni bullshit, because the things that we are supposed to criminalize 100%, of course ngono ya watoi, that's criminal, and I knew that was criminal even since 1920. Hiyo wezi niambia kitu yote ati imekuwa criminal just saizi. Corruption destroys so many lives that, like, look at hii fact moja. I think I talked about it on the previous videos when I was talking about things like garbage collection. We've privatized garbage collection, something that's supposed to be a county's responsibility. Na inafaa kuwa ni responsibility lena, apart from it being a county, inafaa kuwa like ina create jobs. Hiyo tumeput in the hands of individuals. Our parking system, the money has to go through the hands of an individual before it goes to the government. E-citizen goes through the hands of individuals. Like when you look at all this nonsense, things that the government itself can handle on its own. Because look at IKONINI, easy stories are like lawyer fees, where the government ends up spending so much on lawyers, and we have an attorney general, and we have that's the way the problem is. We need to criminalize corruption and make it actually a criminal offense. But we wake up in the morning and we think all this free speech is what we need to curb. And let's pretend we are not curbing free speech. We are trying to curb watoi kuwa na ngono na watoi kujiumiza juu ya cyber harassment. Na vile nimesema, just back it up with numbers. Just send me a few numbers, show me watoi kama walidedi juu ya kuenda kwa internet na akakuwa harassed, and I'll be kwa frontline nikisupport hiyo. But I don't think that's the reason behind this bill. I think the reason behind this bill is just censorship, and the fact that last year the internet is the reason why people went to the streets to protest. And yes, so I'm personally someone who does not believe in that Occupy State House, Occupy JKIA nonsense. But one thing that I respect is your ability, your right to write it down. If you decide to go there and you suffer the consequences, sour. But you should at least be able to write that down. But now we are going to reach a level where we can't write that down. And for our parents to jump on this bandwagon, they have to wherever it. Like cyber harassment, just write a new bill. Alafu tuambie, this criminalizes ngono ya watoi. Tutakuwa kwa frontline tukisupport 100%. But we know there's a reason why that your part ya watoi ilikuwa very small. And no one is even sharing that because everyone supports that. And so the government claiming that we don't support that is just the government being very, very dishonest. Lakini kama kawa, sisahau, corruption is still legal. The politicians need money to steal. Amka jo, toa hiyo blanketi, acha ujinga. Iko Nini.